right, let's talk about the literature review. You know the one. If you're doing any kind of academic work, you have definitely faced this giant. And for a lot of people, it just feels like this tedious hurdle, right? This massive summary you have to power through before you can get to the real research. But what if we've been looking at it all wrong? Today, we're going to crack the code on this crucial academic task. I mean, does the very thought of starting a literature review make you feel like you're just lost in a giant ocean of articles and books and papers? Yeah, you are definitely not alone. It's probably one of the most common challenges out there for students and researchers. So let's just flip the script on this. I want you to stop thinking of it as some kind of glorified book report. Instead, I want you to put on your detective hat, because that's what your literature review really is. It's an investigation. You're not just reporting what other people have said, you are solving a case. Okay, let's dive right in. Every good detective, every good investigation, it starts with a clear mission. For us, that means we've got to define our case and understand what this whole investigation is really for. Think of this list right here as your official mission brief. A great literature review, it does all of these things. It sets the scene, it surveys what other detectives have already found, and it maps out the whole conversation. But crucially, it finds the gaps, the missing pieces of the puzzle. This right here is how you justify your own investigation and prove that you have the skills to actually solve the case. All right, so every detective has their essential tools, right? But for this job, you're not going to need a fingerprint kit or a badge. Nope, you're going to need something way more powerful. First things first, let's get our terms straight. A literature review is a critical analysis. The key word there is analysis. See, it's not just a list of stuff. It's your big chance to spot the patterns, the trends, and maybe most importantly, the weaknesses in all the research that's come before. And this is your number one tool, your secret weapon. Critical thinking is the magnifying glass you're going to use to examine every single piece of evidence, every article, every study, to see what really holds up and what doesn't. So whenever you pick up a new source, you start interrogating it. You got to ask the tough questions. And the first one is always foundational. What was this study actually trying to do in the first place? Then you get a little skeptical. You start looking closer at the how. How did they do their research? Were their methods totally solid? Or can you spot some potential holes in their approach? Now, even if you do find flaws, remember, even kind of shaky evidence can be useful. So what valuable insights can you still pull from their work that might help you build your own case? And all of this leads to the final, most important question. Based on everything you've learned, their strengths, their weaknesses, what will you do differently? How are you going to be the one to push this case forward? Okay, so you've got your mission, you got your toolkit. Now, how do you actually do the investigation? Well, let's break it down into a really simple 3-step process for following the clues. Think of it like this. First, you do a broad scan of the whole scene just to get the lay of the land. That means just reading abstracts and conclusions to quickly map out the territory. Then you zoom in for a focused review of the most important pieces of evidence. That's when you read the really key articles from start to finish. And finally, you pull it all together in a comprehensive critique to build your own theory of the case. And here is a piece of advice that should be a huge relief. You cannot and you should not read everything. Seriously, a good detective knows which leads are worth following and which ones are dead ends. It's all about being strategic, not just trying to read the entire library. And this quote? This is just a perfect example of the goal of your critique. You're summarizing what's already known, and then you point right to what isn't. This sentence right here, that is the sound of a detective finding the missing piece, identifying the gap in the research that makes their own investigation absolutely necessary. So, you've gathered all your clues. Now, you can't just toss them in a box and call it a day. You have to organize them into a clear, compelling case file that lays out your argument for everyone to see. A great way to get started is by literally mapping the debate. You could draw it out on a whiteboard, or just use a simple table to keep track of who agrees with whom and who is challenging an old idea. This approach turns what could be a flat summary into a really dynamic conversation between all the experts. Now pay close attention here, because this is about finding your own voice. The first example, the descriptive one, that's just being a reporter. Smith said this. Okay, fine. But the second one, the critical voice, that is you being the lead detective. You see the difference? It doesn't just state a fact. It puts that fact into a conversation, it introduces some tension, and it analyzes what it all means. This is how you go from just reporting facts to showcasing your own intelligence. And think of these words as road signs for your argument. Words like however, moreover, and therefore literally guide your reader through the twists and turns of your logic. They make the connections between your points crystal clear so your audience never ever gets lost. Okay, let's bring it all home to the final breakthrough. After all of this investigation, all this analysis and organization, what's the ultimate point? Where is all this work actually leading? And here it is. This is the big takeaway. Your literature review is your opening argument. It's that moment where you stand up, you show the academic world the conversation so far, and then, by pointing out that critical gap, you prove exactly why your contribution isn't just interesting, it's absolutely necessary. When you think of it as an investigation, the whole task changes. It goes from being a chore to a challenge. It becomes the very foundation you're going to use to build your unique mark on your field. So, go on. Grab your magnifying glass. What case are you ready to crack?